AM, I'm really glad to be able to talk to you today. I'm curious for people that don't know you, how you would tell a little bit of your story to how you got to be doing the kind of educational work that you are doing now.
Big question, man. Thanks for asking me to talk, first off, and thanks to anybody who listens out there. I listen. I landed in the world with unanswerable questions. I don't know. I think we all did, but I was sort of aware of them maybe a little earlier than some. I've been interested in just through we might come up in conversation. I've written about a lot of on some of my Substacks, but for life reasons, I landed in a culture very different than mine. Um, and I mean, than my birth culture, and was struck very early on with how the hell is it that these people are so weird in everything they do, and yet they seem to have figured it out, and we like did things the right way, and we had it figured out back where I came from, and so how is that possible? And so this question of sort of how do people, what I would say now, and certainly to my 13-year-old mind, this wasn't the language, but the question was, how is it that people are making meaning in these kind of totally weird and different ways? How do they progress and how do they navigate? And then personally for me, I had to answer the question of how do you maintain sanity? And then the way I'm wired, how do you kind of thrive and grow and play and create when everything keeps getting turned upside down? And so this issue of again, what we call now change, transformation, all of that became just a life question that I had to answer because of circumstance. So that's the kind of origin. More practically, I studied Chinese philosophy and world music as an undergrad. There were and with a minor in sound engineering, and
Didn't know that. Didn't know that.
yeah, there weren't any jobs available unless I wanted to kind of sweep the floors at a small recording studio for
Yep.
10 years to maybe
Yep.
get to a point where they pay me to be a third tier engineer, and help others form relationships, like just do the interaction thing. They thought you were magic. And then the second thing is, if you could, what we would now call innovative, you could just think in ways that basically an artist thinks, but if you could think that way in the context of business, they thought you were some kind of wizard. And so, led in business. I was internal for a few years until the ripe old age of 24. I was running a business, had 42 million in revenue and 121 employees at the age of 24. Just that, like,
Amazing.
I stumbled into this thing. It's crazy. Had no reason to be there, but it worked because of that, those kind of random competencies, and decided that I didn't want to work for anybody else again the rest of my life, and that what I wanted to focus on was the thing that people thought I was doing that was weird and magical and they wanted to pay me for. And I wanted to just focus on, cool, how do I actually bring some discipline to that? And then how do I make that life's work in terms of development of others and creating spaces? So that's the origin, life circumstance of needing to figure some things out, wired for things like Chinese philosophy, circumstance of landing in business, and realizing, oh shit, what for me is just passive curiosity. I don't know how to make money on. Turns out people are willing to pay a premium for because they don't have even the slightest clue of how to begin on these conversations. And that was 30 plus years ago. And to this day, God knows there's a lot of work out there. People still don't know how to approach this conversation in a meaningful way.
What's so beautiful about that to me is that you answered like primarily with culture in a sense, instead of dropping right into your professional and educational background. It was more of this big, deep cultural question of how we make sense from this culture to that culture and how bewildering that is. It's really neat. I wonder if you do maybe like the last 5 years, like how you started DAE,
Oh,
where you are now in the most immediate history with your education work.
was that the question you were actually answering?
No,
Like a big
nope,
old.
nope.
Okay,
I
good.
intentionally kept it as big as possible because I think that actually revealed where I want to go in this conversation, which is about culture and engagement and being sensitive to
Yeah,
multicultural approaches to our
sure.
development, really.
Sure. The most recent, listen, I had what by all objective measures was a very nice, successful career in the advisory world, focused primarily on large scale change, innovation. You've heard this story. All the major pharmas, most of the major techs.
IO Psych, right? You were doing
I
formally
had
trained in IO Psych.
at one point that in my late 20s, after doing the work for a while, I met some people who were affiliated with the Duran Institute. I met them at the Westinghouse Quality and Productivity Center, and they were the first sort of business people I like vibed with. You know, their ethos, you know, the Duran people, the W. Edwards Deming people back in the day were the first folks like, okay, cool, yeah, you're part of my tribe in terms of where they were operating from, in terms of
Yeah.
package on that. And like two-thirds of them came out of the Columbia org psych or the Columbia
Nice.
education program. And so, yeah, I wound up terminating at a master's practitioner. I just had no interest
Yeah.
in research. I still don't. And so I just cut out at that point and continued my practice. At this point now, close to 8 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I decided I'm kind of done. You know, I'm done with that life. And um, when I landed as an immigrant, I landed in New Haven, Connecticut, and that town sort of raised me, helped me get
Mm.
into a lot of like, you know, bad trouble, but then also helped me get out of a lot of bad trouble, just by
Mm.
the culture, you know, bad.
So cool.
And so I decided to come back here to open a nonprofit and take the work we had done for 30 years with, we would joke that fundamentally the work we were doing was remedial human for 60-year-old executives. And like that was the background, that was the locker room joke, you know. And I've been teaching in a grad psychology program since 2000, this is my 24th year, 2001. And so I had brought some of the work to the grad school level. I thought we were going to experiment with, can we bring this down to high school? And so I did what I do, which is I poked around for 18 months, 2 years, really tried to understand the system, try to be part of the system, the culture, the local, you know, ecosystem, the local education system, and just listen, you know, just sit, just sit in the forest, see what kind of things were growing there and what kind of things weren't. And then a little over 5 years ago now, we opened DAE, and the plan was just to have a little small campus that you know maybe hit 25, 50 high school students in New Haven a year. We're now at 3 campuses, talking about a fourth and a fifth. And that's not a success story. That is the equivalent of, you know, the ER needs to hire more doctors because there are more and more car crashes. So I don't consider our growth a success story. I consider it, you know, concerning in terms of how many folks are getting left behind. So anyway, that's the origin of DAE.
I want to double click on bringing graduate level human development for 60-year-old executives. What does that look like bringing that down to high school students?
I'm not even a gardener, let alone like a forestry guy, but I'll use that analogy. If you go into an old growth forest and you see that the trees are sort of growing in an unhealthy way and they're collapsing in on each other, the work it takes to redirect their growth, it's possible and
Nice.
it's massive because they're entrenched in a way of growing. They've got these huge like root systems and trunks that are, it's a lot of work. Sometimes you got to bring a saw and then there's some things you got to cut off, and it's doable. If you're working with saplings, the work
Yeah.
is to create an environment that fully encourages them to grow in the healthy direction they're already inclined to grow in. And so the work is very different. It's the same intention, but it's a very different intention. Kids are rarely, in my experience, sort of fitting into the clip. And we work with public high school kids, all the problems, the things that people, you know, it's an extreme rarity that a kid needs to be fixed. So rare. Um, what they're lacking is nitrogen in the soil, proper watering, proper access to sunshine. And so the focus, it's beautiful. The focus gets to be on the stuff that I and the folks that work for me really enjoy, which is really creating a certain environment within which they can just constantly surprise us with the things that they're able to bring into bloom, as it were. Um, and there's never a saw that's needed. There's never a tough decision about which trees are unsalvageable at this point because the effort involved just doesn't justify, because we're going to miss these 40 other trees. And those were decisions on the corporate education side. It's like, you know, this person's too far down the rabbit hole with me. And
Yeah.
not that they're
Interesting.
not that they're not worth working with. They're a human being. Of course, they're worth
Yep.
working with. If I look at the effort involved and the readiness of that
Yep.
individual, 4 years of becoming unready that I'd have to fight with, you let it go. Never happens on the high school side. Never. 5 years
So
in, 15, we're close to 1,500 kids at this point. Like we've been at work. Never has happened. I'd say, that kids, forget it. We're not touching it.
no expulsions.
the first things, I don't get to spend nearly enough time with students. Like we have an adult campus as well. Even with them, I don't get to spend nearly enough time. But I make sure I'm there for day one, almost always. And then, throughout as much as possible. But day one, the very first thing they hear from me, Sean, is listen, you're okay. You're already okay.
Yeah.
You're going to do things in here over the course of a year that I promise you're not going to believe, and
Yeah,
that
I love
people
that.
are not going to believe. I guarantee it. Like I absolutely
Yeah,
guarantee it. And you're not going to be any better than you are today in our
love it.
eyes, right? And they're like, don't believe me on it. You check just on behaviorally, but you're okay right now, right? So we operate that way. Right? I have an essay coming out this week that sort of speaks to this. We don't. This isn't. There's no banners around that. There's no whatever around that. That's how we operate. And so it's not possible for a kid to fail. It's possible for projects to fail. It's all kinds of transactional things are possible for failure. It's impossible for that human being to fail with us. Our job is how to convert them conform to who they are while never losing the crazy high standards we have.
And I imagine that translates to your teachers and team and staff as well, in terms of your team development and organizational development.
Everything. So if you looked at our pedagogy, the last item on there is, and we sort of debated with the wording on this because it's really dangerous to get into paternalistic language, but we just couldn't find a simpler way to say it. And it's an internal document anyways. The last item on the pedagogy is the parents must always be as healthy as the children. Right. And so every practice we do with the students, we do with ourselves. We do huddles every day with the students, check in, check out. We do it with ourselves. And everything we do with them, we do with us because there's no separation in that way. Well, one of the successes is when visitors come and at some point they'll say to me, okay, I can't tell who's an educator and who's a student. Could you help me out? Who's on your staff? I'm like, beautiful. That's perfect. That's what it should feel like.
Yeah, some of my favorite feedback from wisdom workshop participants is I've never been in a learning environment where the leader of the group is one of the students doing everything that the students are doing. That's really actually liberating in a sense to see that we're all on that. Are there successes that you're proud of that you see? I love that one. Kind of non-hierarchical space where everyone's doing the work and we esteem everyone for who they are. High rigorous standards. Anything else jumping to mind that you're
I don't want to get on short conversations like this, and that's why you know this as well as anyone who knows me casually can. Like I'm very resistant to these type of conversations, like because things can get they can become kind of cute, they can become sound bites, and so what I'm about to say, like on its own, it's just like it's just Instagram nonsense. Like it doesn't have any depth of practice to it, but. I don't celebrate successes. I'm not interested in
so
success.
good.
I know how that sounds, and listen,
No.
this conversation as well. Like I'm very good at separating small W work from big W work, right? And on the management side of things, small W work, I'm interested in success, hitting
Yep.
financial targets,
Yep.
hitting operational targets. You have to, or you don't
Yep.
sustain,
Yep.
right? But in the stuff that matters, success isn't what we're looking at. Um, I am. I am forever appreciative and sort of in a state of I don't know, curiosity, wonder, whatever you want to call it, about I could call it, of how easy it actually is
Wow.
for people to pop. We make it really hard, but it's actually really, really, really like simple, right? And it's maybe not easy only because what I said about the kind of older executives, like only because of all the habituation we have to fight against as educators, as space holders, as parents, as leaders, all the stuff we have to fight against is maybe what makes it hard, but the actual work is easy. And so what I'm constantly marveling at, I just did before you I had a little break, but before that I was doing a sort of I don't know, like an exit-ish interview with a woman from our adult program who just landed a job. Like that on the adult side, that's our goal, is something you kind of launch into a career that matters to you while helping you really clarify the career, the values that inform the kind of impact you want up in the world. And so she landed early before she even finished the program. And so, we always sort of, we carry a lot of, capture a lot of qualitative data in the form of story. And so I wanted to kind of capture her story and just friggin', I don't know the audience. I swear. I'm gonna swear you can believe it. It was fucking beautiful. It was just
Yeah,
talking about this
feel it.
in 5 months, just this popping, this kind of, settling in, popping, etc. And again, it's identical to the popping of any living thing, right? I said saplings earlier, right? Like if you actually watch things grow, it's like crazy. It's the most mundane thing that's ever been. It's what life has done forever. And yet when you watch it, it's like, holy shit, look at that. This thing came out of a little pebble, you know?
Yeah, I'm getting super emotional.
Mm,
Um, Surprising because of how I notice in myself and in the culture how we default back to these success metrics and the things that I feel like I have to do as a teacher to get my students through, and the effect that that has on them in the classroom, and the effect it has on me and my willingness to do the work.
yeah,
And that this feeling of like, it's like a breath of fresh air of like, ah, the awe of, right, the work attending to particular people and being curious and esteeming them is easy and nourishing.
yeah. But there's a payoff for focusing on success and on transactions, all that. And the payoff is you get to avoid moments like you just had.
Right.
Because in this society, we that is dangerous. That interpersonal vulnerability, that personal vulnerability, that sense of that whatever it is, that tenderness, that forces you to step outside of title, role,
Yeah.
all of that stuff. And we all know how to do it, but we're in an environment. It's like it's like taking your jacket off in Alaska in December. Like it's just
Yeah.
that simple. You know, nothing wrong with taking your jacket off. We all know how to do it. But we found ourselves at the tail end of a really important era in terms of the progress it's made. I am not a sort of industrial basher. There's so much benefit we've gotten out of it, but we let the thing get too cold, and now no one can take their jacket off, and that's a payoff, right? So if we focus on these transactions, we focus on these things, we don't have to deal with the intense pain of taking the jacket off in an environment that is so cold. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we can practice as the Tibetan monks do and regulate
Inner
that
heat.
comes from within. And as practitioners, that becomes, I'm going to pivot the conversation for you, that becomes one of the things. Like when I hire people, and development with us, that's what it looks like. It's not skills. Like if you get skill gaps or because the work evolves, tech evolves, and it's like, great, well, you do a third party. I don't care. We'll fund it. And, but the development is this. It's how do you cultivate these sort of awareness and then also this capacity to generate your own heat and be a certain kind of furnace for others in a cold environment. That's the actual development for a practitioner of this kind of work.
Yeah, there's two. I mean, I'm curious to hear what you would say to teachers that are working in more traditional establishment. Like I'm in a land grant university here in Colorado State. A lot of first generation students who are in a college classroom for the first time, who are shouldering responsibilities um, right next to, let's say, very more privileged students coming right out of high school that are not shouldering the same responsibilities, next to a minority of students that are returning, so have had some let's say, real world professional experience and find themselves kind of culturally distant from the other students that for any number of reasons. So basically, there's a variety of students we're working with. I'm curious to see. That's one direction I want to take that. This is how you might see that work inside of a traditional educational system where the incentives are cold, and yeah, not a lot of warmth there. But I'm selfishly interested in how you're doing your inner heat work now. Just kind of, I know that you are a practitioner first and foremost, and that this is something that you are working on and that you are doing.
Yeah.
So maybe dealer's choice. I don't know if you want to talk about your practice of how you see this translating to what you know about me and how this might translate to my own classroom. I feel like I'm getting my own answer listening to myself ask the question. Uh,
So, like this, Sean, it is for me. It's all equivalent of bicycle riding.
yeah,
You
that's
know,
right.
your first hour on the bike, you are just all in your head and you're figuring
Yep.
out how to balance. And the first week, you get out of your head and you wind up scraping your knee, and
Yeah.
then you head again for a period of time. But eventually, if you stay with it, and more importantly, now with bicycling, it's great because gravity will be your correction. Like you don't
Mm.
have to worry about, right? It'll let you know, uh,
Yeah.
and you miss the thing. Um, with our work, it's for me, it's always been community. It's having just one even. For a long time, it was my former partner Mel, who was much older than me. We met late in life, but turned out we were on the same journey for several lifetimes, I think. He
Mm.
passed a couple years ago. So there could be one person that acts as that kind of gravitational force, but it is just being at practice for an extended period of time, and then 30 years into bike riding, there's nothing you think about. You just hop on the bike and you move. And if it's raining, you know how to move. And if there are potholes, you know how to move. And then you also, if you're really committed to bike riding, you keep putting yourself in rougher and rougher terrain. You keep putting yourself in, ride the city, and you're riding it, and that precognitive thing just builds and builds and builds. Right. And so at this point, not through any magic, not through any, skill, not through any, but just reps. I don't really work on this stuff for myself anymore. This is part of life practice, but only just out of reps, just out of just enough reps at it, enough days, enough. I've not done anything in my entire life since age 13. I've had been at work on the same thing, and like for a period of time I got paid for it. And now I run a nonprofit on it. And for a period of time I was, a teenager, drinking and doing whatever else too much while still in the right. But it's all been the same thing, right? So I got lots of reps under my belt. And so I think that for me, that's all it is. When we bring in new people, um, I mean, first off, I'm always filtering for, I let somebody else in the organization, depending on the role, filter for the technical stuff. Because there's some baseline technical things for some roles, particularly the tech educator role, just some baseline, but those are easy to filter for. First thing we do, well, you come to an interview with us, right? We usually do a video screen first, just 15 minutes, just a vibe check, make sure you kind of know what you're going to do with us, and we get a sense of you. But almost everybody gets invited in after that video check, that video conversation. First thing we do, they come in and it's like, cool, hang out with students. Like we always do the interviews during
Yep.
live time. It's like, great, go sit. And our
Yep.
environment is what, and then it's, how are you? Are you worried about your performance? What are you doing?
So good.
When you talk to people, adult students, high school students, whatever it is,
So good.
right? And I don't care what your role is. What I want to see is, are you comfortable in your skin? And are you comfortable letting others be in their skin? Right. And if you're not, that's okay. That's not a deal breaker, right? There's just some level of, now if you got the thing built up, if you're a 27-year-old who's got a 60-year-old sort of persona built up, or the roots are so deep, and it's like, okay, I don't know, do we have time for this kind of work? But barring that, what it becomes is just a certain kind of calibration that if you do wind up getting, invited to join our organization and you decide you want to join after the process, those early things sort of tell me and tell my team kind of, where are you in this journey of bike riding? Kind of what kind of reps are you going to benefit from? Not what models do you need, not what classes you need to go to, but what are the types of experiences? What are the reps that you need to take to kind of help you get self-sustaining around different types of cold, as it were? What are the kind of reps you
It's
need to
good.
take to help you get more and more vulnerable in areas that right now for you are not, and for some folks it's about self-image, and for some folks it's about trying to please and trying to help and trying to, it's across the board, a bunch of things. Um,
Mm,
and so that when then we just engage with them that way, kind of I and my key people, it's like, cool, this person, this is what we're going to keep kind of nudging them on. This is the
mm,
kind of exposure we're going to keep giving them. And they keep riding the bike in these different,
mm.
back in different terrains. So we put them in terrains that they're not comfortable in.
So good.
Uh, and that's what development on that side looks like. And eventually they get enough reps and it's like, look at you, look at what you're doing. And it's nearly identical to what we do with students, right? Students come in, we take it, I mean, every single day. It's madness, but like every day, every student, the faculty prior to program and after program. I've got 150 students at a time, and we're going through everybody. Um, and it's the same kind of conversation, little Johnny, as it were. Really, we got to start exposing him to ADHD because he's getting too comfortable about blocking off this part of his expression, and so we got to figure out how to safely create more and more of those experiences for him.
Yeah, I really appreciate it reminds me of how many times on Clubhouse that there is a sense of advice asking where it's like, oh, will you give me some advice for how you might apply this to my position in my classroom?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I remember in some ways the advice boils down to, hey man, you do you. Advice is advice if you're looking at that to as a source of warmth external to yourself in some kind of a way to use your metaphor.
Yeah, and that requires, and yet we've had this conversation on Clubhouse as well. It requires that you've got. Whoop, hold on, got a little background noise. You have to edit this out. Can you hear that?
Not on your
Okay,
end.
let me make sure. I've got workers at the house. I'm actually out of the house today. I've got some workers here dealing with something. Um, it requires the discernment around what is small W work and what is big W work, right? Um, because we have funders, like education is a human right. We don't charge for anything. Any of our programs, our adult programs have a stipend attached to them, let alone we don't charge for, right? So everything is funder based. We have great large institutional partners. But the reality is they're funders and there are metrics.
Yep.
It's a business. It's a
Yep.
nonprofit, but it's a
Yep.
business. Right?
Yep.
Metrics. They're operational metrics. And so there's a requirement of having some discernment on what is just management and things that need to be in a state of control predictability. And those as much as possible, sort of automating, processing, et cetera, so that there's as much time as possible for these other things. But it's easy to lose focus on that, and then your business falls apart. And it doesn't matter how warm an environment you're creating, the walls fall down, and now
Yeah.
everybody's because the thing's gone.
And I think this is where the plus side of advice, as it were, not a like, hey, if I were you, I would do this, but a let me tell you what I've seen doing what I've done, given my experience as and why I find these conversations so valuable. One of the most fascinating things I've learned about you is your 7-year cycle of artistic engagement, where you take a genre or a medium and you say go hard on it for a set amount of time before you pick up a new one. Maybe just a little bit about that and the art of living in terms of taking these disciplines, photography, acting, serious on their own terms.
This summer, I spent 2 weeks up in Lubeck, Maine, the easternmost part of the United States, as it turns out, population of 130, except for the summers, where for the months of July and August, there are, I don't know how many people come into town since 1992, started by a classical pianist. And so these classical pianists and cellists go up there and have a summer called Summer Keys. And then 6 years ago, the founder, who's now in his 90s, invited one of his former students who took sort of played shopping to jazz and was an accomplished saxophonist and clarinetist to come up and start a program in saxophone. And so for 2 weeks, I spent up in Lubeck, Maine, because I'm starting a new, technically last year was a new 7-year cycle, but with COVID, I pushed I pushed a year out of it. And so, yes, I did a deep immersion, 6 hours a day in saxophone. I'm starting to work with an instructor here and had a mastery target on that. And for the next 7 years, that's it. Here's what it's about for me. It's about three things. One, like at the end of this, so at the end of each week, they do a recital because there's like serious musicians that go to this thing up in Lubeck. And every Friday night, they have like events throughout there. It's a beautiful community. But every Friday night, they do a formal recital, and folks are up there working on kind of master projects, or they're up there on master classes. There's kind of mid-career professional musicians, and they're working on, And so Friday night's an opportunity for whoever's there that week. They do a recital, they put up a piece, right? And I've literally never put any instrument to my mouth, like a woodwind horn, nothing, you know what I mean? Like I am a rank beginner. And the second day of the week, the instructor tells me, a friend, you should come to this thing. It's beautiful people put on. And he joked, he was like, yeah, maybe you'll play. And I said, yeah, let's do it. And I created like a 4-note, like little improvised melody. And we kind of worked throughout the week. We just took each of our times together. We just would take like 10 minutes and just improvise off that melody. And I'm like, I'm making bad notes. I'm, whatever. Half the time I'm like, I can't get the note to come out. We do that on Friday night. I get up in that thing, and he and we did a 6-minute improvisation on that thing, and it was fucking awful. And it's one of the reasons why I do this is that it
Yeah.
forces to get back into a relationship with what I think is a really fundamental human thing, which is I don't know shit. I don't know shit. Like on all the things that matter, I don't know shit. I am lost in the universe.
Yeah.
And so this thing becomes visceral. It's the first time I was on stage. Same thing. I was with like real actors, and like they were very generous to me in the rehearsal process and all that. And everybody knew I sucked, and I kind of knew I sucked, and I didn't realize how bad I was until I got on stage that first night. And it was embarrassing in hindsight. But it's a reconnection to that is what it is to be on this fucking planet, is to be just totally, utterly lost and trying to do the best you can.
Yep.
One reason why I do it is it becomes this really intense reminder, viscerally, not intellectually, not in a book, not but visceral reminder that we are just kind of lost children and doing the best we can. The second reason I do it is everything connects back to my core practice. And so invariably, I find that what I'm always doing is like, how do I get through the weirdness, get through the, whatever, the ugliness, the clumsiness, and what I'm looking for is where's my voice in this? Right?
Mm.
I'm not going to do it right. I don't care. I have the
That's right.
luxury of none of these things are going to be like professions for me. None of them are going
Yep.
to make money.
Yep.
So what it becomes is, okay, great. Now this is a different container within which, where does my voice in this container? And so 7 years is about, enough of the craft to really, not be restricted by craft, right? But the main objective is, what's my voice that connects to the core thing I'm interested in the world, and how do I express that, right? Photography is probably the one where I found it the most. If you look at my work, I don't know how good it is. It's not, it's not. I mean, everybody's a photographer, whatever.
You have a voice as a photographer, unquestionably about it.
Yeah, it's so like I'm happy with that phase of my creative work, because my stuff that gets produced, I don't know if it's good. I don't care. It's gonna die with me, whatever. I don't need,
Yep.
but like I can feel it connected to the same things we work on the core work of my life, right? So that's the
Yep.
second reason I do these things. Is it's another container in which to, explore the voice, and invariably then have these good effects on opening up something new in the core work, right? The human development work. And then the third is it's fun. It's
Yep.
just, it's a gas, it's just,
Yep.
like playing with
That's
with
it.
with creative outlets that by their nature, if you're willing to stumble through the craft part of it, just invite you to play. Like at
That's
a
right.
certain point, they invite you to not take it seriously. And I have the luxury of not making my living at it. And so it really invites you to not take it seriously in the business sense. And it's just these instruments of play, these instruments of exploring, these instruments of you know, like those bears who, are kind of stumbling around the forest having eaten, magic mushrooms. And, somebody sent me an article about, this research on this actual practice of them, whatever, but it brings you back to like a certain just, I don't know, looseness.
Something that I hear a lot of. I hear this with singing a lot. When people say, talk about singing, it's one of those things that we get super self-conscious about. So do you like singing? Oh yeah, but I'm not very good at it. And
Mm.
that is that are you trying to be a singer? Oh no, no, no. Oh, well then
Yeah.
why do we care if you're good? I mean, the question really is whether or not you enjoy it, right? Are you trying to perform or oh no, 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 I'm doing this other thing. Oh well, just you enjoy it though, right? And I feel like there was an interesting article about, or and just a take on how many folk musicians there were in the
Mm.
20s and 30s. Basically, like before television, every family had some amount, some instrument, maybe not every family, but it was just a tradition to play an instrument, play a song. It didn't matter. You're not trying to play it well or badly.
Yeah. One of the many, again, lot of advantages out of these last few hundred years of this sort of industrial linear left brain mindset. But one of the many significant prices is we took artistic expression as something separate from day-to-day life and turned it into a
So we did.
profession, into
So
a hobby.
yep,
We did these things just as
yep,
like the way we ate, like they were just part of day-to-day life. Even community was part of day, sitting around the
yep,
fire day, part of life. It wasn't a
yep,
planned thing. It wasn't a meetup invite. It wasn't
yep,
we just human, right?
yep,
And artistic expression is the same thing. We didn't need to have it as a class, as a whatever. You just, to your point, you just did it. It's part of what
yep.
you did.
Yeah. So maybe let's talk about Substack.
Hmm.
How you feeling about Substack? You've written a couple essays on that platform that I are in my top 10 all time that I've read, and I've been reading a lot on there. Um,
Beautiful.
which is
Right.
funny to say. One of the things we teach young writers is to write without, just to stop the inner narrative of how good this is or how bad this is. And yet we're tempted to say, "Oh, that's so good,"
Yeah.
which creates the, well, what if mine? I'm also in the room, and what if mine isn't as good as AM's? And that's why I redact that compliment. But I don't think so. I think it feels like you're writing from a place that is beautifully unserious, but being serious at the same time. So I'm wondering about how you approach Substack and what you like about the platform, anyone you're reading there, anything about that.
Yeah, I would say, listen, well, on my side, we're fine. I'm fundamentally immune to praise.
Yes.
But I'm appreciative of the sentiment from your side, right? Like, so I think both of you, but I think it's one of the prime praise and criticism. I'm uninterested. I'm interested in critique from a very narrow set of people in each area of my life, where
Love
they're
it.
qualified to provide critique because they have put in the reps. But
Mm.
criticism and I'm interested in impact on others. If you're telling me the impact it had on you, positive or negative, very interested.
Yeah,
But criticism or praise of me, I'm not. I don't care.
that
Um,
helps. And you approach
yeah,
that throughout the writing process as well. I imagine that's kind of
life again. This is part of just the comfort zone. And like, there's no. Yeah, I don't know how one can create what if one is hung like actually create if one is hung up on criticism. But then if you're going to make yourself immune to criticism, you also have to be willing to make yourself immune to praise because otherwise you fall into another very nasty kind of trap, right?
yep, yep, yep.
It all becomes about cool. I'm glad you had a good experience. And then, like I said, if there are writers who are actually writers, I don't really have anybody right now like that, but whatever, different areas of life where it's like, okay, you put in the reps, there's a perspective you have that I think is not right, but it's rigorous. Yeah, it could be right, could be wrong, whatever. It's rigorous, and so I'll take critique from you in this area of my life. Um, because I know it'll be contextually relevant, right? But affective critique and praise, again, I'll listen, I'm thankful. But so anyway, point is no harm done. Um, I'm just writing, man. So I have one coming out this week, although I think they're going to push it till next week. I get somebody who's managing it for me. That's my favorite one that I've written because um, it's the one closest to the real sort of hammer provocation I eventually intend to evolve that thing to. Um, it's called Enough is a Feast, and it'll be out, you know. And so my answer your question, my experience with it is it's you know, I don't know. Substack itself, I don't pay a ton of attention to. Like I I write, I send it off, and then Laurel and whoever that's responsible for it kind of puts it on social media and does
Love it.
whatever. I historically, I think we've had this conversation. Historically, I've only ever written for clients and students. Like I've written a lot over the decades at this point. God, it's time's such an odd thing. Linear time's such an odd thing as well.
Yeah.
Um, but it's always been because again, for me, it's got to be contextually, it has to have a context. Sort of stuff like that out of context. I always get worried, as I was saying earlier, that it becomes an idea, it becomes a meme, it becomes a whatever, right? I've shifted on that because of the needs of the nonprofit are very different than the needs of the life practice I've always had. There's a complete there's no harm done. There was no harm done in maintaining anonymity in the kind of work I did. And in fact, it was beneficial because you're working with executives who are, and it's better to stay in the background, right? And then I'd write stuff for, this thing by nature of it, funding based, the things that tend to drive funding, there's a value in being more public. So that's why I've started writing more publicly. And then the experience of it has been, it's been another just practice area. And so I treat it like that. It's in my schedule. I have my own version of writing, which is go wander for 7 hours and then make sure I have a laptop with me. And then at a certain point, and don't think about it, just kind of at a certain point, sit down and then knock out 3,000 words. And that's just how I write. It's just, I don't know. That just seems to be just the thing that works for me. Um, and then at some point, a day or two later, go back and spend an hour editing. And that's kind of it. And so it's the I'm meandering on this because I'm trying to find my answer to your question. Not that anything I've said isn't accurate, but I think here's actually maybe the real answer to the question. Of the thing that would be thoughtful for me, I guess, in answer to your question. What I'm finding about the Substack is, surprisingly, it is the most efficient way I've found so far to raise and then have context for conversations with my staff about different
Mm.
aspects of what's in the background of this body of work.
Mm.
And I've also found it with a couple of funders where it's a fast fund, actually some government folks, because by nature of our thing, we deal with some government agencies where three is a client. Like client/student means the same thing, right? Everybody's in that bucket. And so my funders are students/clients or fellow apprentices, maybe is the right way to say it, the government agencies we deal with. And so I think the best thing about the Substack for me it has been context for conversations with funders, partners, and then staff on some background underpinnings of what this thing is that otherwise I would have to have generated a context for.
Mm. Well, I feel warmed by our conversation today, nourished, at ease in the work I'm about to do going into the classrooms I'm going into today. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
appreciate that warmth. Is there anything you want to say? We'll put the links to your work down below if people want to see it. But my
No,
final note,
final note be the final note that's on all my Substack essays. You're all already okay.
yeah,
Now Get to fucking work.
That's right. Sounds good. Thanks, AM.
All right, we'll see you.
Peace.
Okay.